Ørsted's health and safety standards are laid out in detail, and they follow the Quality Health, Safety and Environment Management System. Part A of the Ørsted Electrical Safety Rules contains the overall outlines of how we create a safe working atmosphere. As a general matter, Ørsted-trained persons and Ørsted-trained competent persons need to understand that the electrical safety rules are mandatory. It is the duty of every person concerned with working on the system to make themselves thoroughly familiar with the electrical safety rules and the supporting documentation relevant to their authorization. All persons have a general duty to understand and follow statutory requirements relating to any activity they're involved in. Every employer, contractor or subcontractor shall ensure reasonable care for their own health, safety and welfare and other personnel who may be affected by their acts or omissions at work. Employees will be subject to disciplinary action and possibly prosecution if they fail to follow the Ørsted electrical safety rules, whether intentionally or through neglect or carelessness, and if they unnecessarily endanger their own personal safety or the personal safety of others. The electrical safety rules are an addition to operational safety plans and also include other related procedures issued by Ørsted or other authorities, and any mandatory supporting documents must be complied with. Click Next to continue. In addition to requirements in national legislation, the Ørsted electrical safety rules are based on commitments made in the company's quality, health, safety and environment policy. Ørsted recognises and accepts its responsibilities for ensuring its equipment is designed, constructed, operated and maintained to standards that promote good safety performance through the life of the equipment and when it is decommissioned. To support these policies and commitments, Ørsted has introduced a Quality Health, Safety and Environment Management System to help ensure that these sorts of matters are addressed and comply with requirements of law. Click Next to continue. In the formulation of the Ørsted electrical safety rules, several philosophies have been adopted. Items of electrical and mechanical equipment are interconnected to form systems, and these systems are designed to be operated without danger when they're in normal operating mode. When any work affecting the system has to be carried out, it's necessary to specify electrical safety rules to achieve safety from the inherent dangers within the system. The electrical safety rules are based on protecting personnel from inherent danger by devising ways to make them safe from the system. The Ørsted electrical safety rules outline procedures to safely carry out work affecting the system. These include making the equipment available for the work and establishing safe working conditions. They also include procedures to authorise work requests, as well as for the actual start, execution and clearance of the work, and finally, restoration of the system to its normal operation. Other dangers may arise from the environment in which personnel do the work. The QHSE management system is required to specify ways these other dangers are managed, such as through local method statements and risk assessments. The Ørsted electrical safety rules are supported by approved procedures as necessary. Click Next to continue. Several principles underlie the Ørsted electrical safety rules. First, the electrical safety rules are concerned only with achieving the safety of personnel at work. When work is carried out on high voltage and low voltage equipment or mechanical equipment associated with the electrical system, the primary means of achieving safety is isolation and then establishing points of isolation. The isolating devices must be locked where practicable. In the case of high voltage equipment, the locking of isolation devices must be followed by earthing. And when working on energised equipment, safety from the system is achieved by way of an approved procedure. If isolation from the system is not practicable for working on low voltage equipment, then safety must be achieved by applying an approved procedure. For any mechanical equipment, isolation is followed by draining, venting, and/or discharging stored energy or media as appropriate. But if the work requires mechanical equipment to be energized, an approved procedure is used to achieve safety. As for nominating personnel to carry out defined duties under the Ørsted electrical safety rules, that is subject to formal procedures for assessing competency, and the assessment method is achieved by an approved Ørsted authorizing officer. The principles also state that the Ørsted electrical safety rules shall ensure that a safe situation exists across all the control boundaries and operational interfaces, whether they are totally or partially within the company's jurisdiction.
Click Next to continue.
The general provisions of the Ørsted electrical safety rules include 3 important interpretations of the word shall, which all persons working under the Ørsted electrical safety rules need to understand and apply, depending upon the situation being dealt with on the worksite. Let's take a look at the use of shall in more detail. Shall, used alone, means that you must follow a certain policy or procedure. It's mandatory, no exception, no discretion is permitted, and no judgment can be made. For example, the general provisions also state that general safety shall be established before work starts, and that before any work can be authorized to commence on equipment, a work request shall have been received detailing the work requirements. But sometimes the term shall where practicable is applied. So let's take a closer look at what shall where practicable means. Shall where practicable is used to qualify a requirement. It imposes a slightly less strict standard. It means that requirements shall be met where it is possible to achieve in the light of current knowledge and invention. However, the requirement cannot be avoided on the grounds of difficulty, inconvenience, or cost. In other words, if we know we can do something, if it has been invented, we will use it. From a practical standpoint, for an Ørsted-trained competent person or an Ørsted-trained person, if you can do something in the interest of safety, you must. For example, under the rules, when isolating devices are used, they shall, where practicable, be immobilized and locked. The third interpretation of shall is shall where reasonably practicable. Let's focus now at the meaning of shall where reasonably practicable. When this interpretation is used to qualify a requirement, then a judgment shall be made as to what is reasonable. This judgment must take into account an assessment of the magnitude of the risk on one hand versus the cost, time, trouble, and effort necessary to avert the risk on the other hand. In other words, it's about judging what's reasonably practicable, what you can and cannot reasonably do. For example, the rules say that when not in use, all long objects in substations shall, where reasonably practicable, be securely locked to a suitable anchorage.
Click Next to continue.
In doing your work, there are important things in the Ørsted electrical safety rules you must understand. First, it's important that everyone understands the critical role an Ørsted-trained competent person plays in making sure work on the system equipment is carried out safely. An Ørsted-trained competent person is a person who has been authorized by the Ørsted electrical safety team to carry out duties specified in writing, including the receipt and clearance of safety documents. Remember that if you are an Ørsted-trained competent person, this means you have all the Ørsted-trained person's responsibilities also. But safety is not just the responsibility of an Ørsted-trained competent person or the company. It is also your personal responsibility as an employee. The rules state that It is the duty of every person concerned with working on the system to make themselves thoroughly familiar with the Ørsted electrical safety rules and appropriate supporting documentation relevant to their authorization.
Click Next to continue.
So when do the Ørsted electrical safety rules apply? It is mandatory to apply them when there is work on or near equipment which makes up part of the system, which is defined as items of equipment used separately or in combination in a process associated with the business of the generation, transmission, and distribution of electrical energy. Therefore, the Ørsted electrical safety rules go into force when all or part of a system is connected to a high-voltage system. Once they kick in, any work performed on the system must be carried out under a detailed safety document approved by a senior authorised person or an authorised person. So any persons looking to do work on system equipment are duly notified that they must first apply for a safety document before starting any task.
Click Next to continue.
Under the Ørsted electrical safety rules, personnel shall not let any part of their body, tools or equipment get closer to exposed energised conductors and insulators than specified safety distances allow, unless the equipment is isolated and authoritatively shown to be de-energised, earthed, and under a relevant safety document. For energised conductors and supporting insulators that are not isolated, only insulated devices are allowed to approach them within specified safety distances in accordance with an approved procedure. When exposed conductors have points of isolation but are not earthed and possibly subject to be energised, only approved voltage measuring devices or earthing devices are allowed to approach within specified safety distances. Click Next to continue. The basic Ørsted electrical safety rules lay out the various precautions that are used for work on or near high voltage equipment, low voltage systems, and mechanical equipment. For all those categories of equipment, when it is possible to perform a task by limiting the work or work area, this precaution is used. It is mandatory to give clear instructions that define the limits. When limiting access is not sufficient for achieving safety from the system, there are required steps for making high voltage, low voltage, and mechanical equipment safe to work around. What is common for all three types of equipment is that they are identified and released from service by a control engineer, or a senior authorised person or authorised person, and the release is recorded. The next step is to isolate equipment from all sources that may make it energised, and to establish points of isolation. When isolating devices are used, they must, where practicable, be immobilised and locked. Prohibition signs must be affixed to all isolation points. When the work involves high voltage equipment, primary earths must also be applied, and, where reasonably practicable, immobilised and locked. The primary earths must be marked with prohibition signs, and the earths must be recorded. If necessary, drain earths must be applied to prevent danger. Any additional precautions to achieve safety from the system during work on equipment must be specified in the safety document. There are also specified steps to follow if power has to be restored for certain types of work or for testing. In the case of work on low voltage equipment, when it is unreasonable to make it de-energised, suitable precautions must be taken to avoid danger. It is the responsibility of a senior authorized person or authorized person to assess the type of work required on or near to live low-voltage equipment and decide whether it should be carried out. An approved procedure is required for any work carried out on energized low-voltage equipment. For items of mechanical equipment, the contents must be adjusted to a level that averts the risk of danger. Where drain valves are involved, they must, where practicable, be locked in the appropriate position and marked with prohibition signs. Where there is potential danger from pressurization, mechanical equipment must be vented. Emissions must be dissipated to avoid danger and environmental impact. Where reasonably practicable, vents must be locked open and marked with prohibition signs. In cases where internal access is required and the residue of contents could cause danger, purging of mechanical equipment is required. Emissions must be dissipated to avoid danger and environmental impact, and the equipment must be restored to atmospheric pressure when the purging is complete. Where the release of stored energy could present danger, it's necessary to contain, equalize, or dissipate this energy safely. Mechanical equipment must be locked in its de-energized state where reasonably practicable. A safety document must be issued before work commences on mechanical equipment, and there are additional precautions taken if it is necessary to restore power for certain types of work. For each category of equipment, any other necessary precautions will be prescribed by a senior authorized person or authorized person. Another type of precaution is demarcation of work areas. Work areas must be clearly defined and, where necessary, physically protected to prevent dangers posed from surrounding system hazards.
Click Next to
When it comes to working on or around electrical and mechanical equipment, guesswork is dangerous. The Ørsted electrical safety rules make it mandatory for all equipment to be identifiable and clearly labelled. The rule states that all work performed on the system shall only be permitted on equipment which are readily identifiable or has fixed to it a means of identification which will remain effective throughout the course of the work. Any permanent and temporary identification installed shall be robust, indelible, and secure. The idea is that we uniquely identify what you need to work on and where it is, so we make sure that you go to the right place. In addition, we can't turn things on or connect them until they are uniquely identifiable. This is because there would be a danger that the senior authorized person or authorized person could go to the wrong, unidentified equipment. So remember to always check that you are at the correct identified equipment. Further details regarding this will be discussed in another module.
click Next to continue.